Hello again and greetings from the vicarage on this first Sunday in August. Not long now until we're starting back to church. I trust that you've all by now received an invitation to a service during this month. If you haven't received one, please let me know and I can sort it out. This first service is next week, and if you haven't received an invite to that service, you will be getting the usual Sunday message, which will be the same message as I give in church. The Sunday message which you receive either by your computer or in the form of a booklet will continue each week, with the message given in church the same as you receive at home. So this hopefully means that no one will be left out. I've probably said that the services will be different, in so much as that we are not allowed to sing at any of the services. During the Holy Communion, you'll only be given the bread, and this I'm supposed to drop into your hands so that there's no physical contact. Of course, everyone will be spaced around the church, that is unless you're from the same household, and then of course you can sit together. At the end of each service, we'll ask you to stay seated until you're asked to leave the church, so that there's no congestion of people in and around the doorway. You'll also be asked to leave straight away and go straight home and not congregate in the churchyard. Now, all these rules that we've been given seem rather harsh and not very friendly, which is the complete opposite to what we're used to when we come to church. But we have to remember that they're there to protect us all and keep us safe. I do hope those who feel able to come to church during this month will enjoy being back in church and don't feel that restrictions are too much of a distraction to our worship. I guess, like many things, if we do them enough times, they will become the new norm, and we won't think anything different. Like me, you've probably heard several different versions as to when and if we ever get back to what we class as normal. But in the meantime, we'll make the best of it and carry on. Both of our Bible readings speak about food. We know how much importance we put on food, and we know that we can't manage without it. But it costs money, it lasts a short time, and it only meets our physical needs. There's been a lot of talk about food, particularly at the beginning of the outbreak of the virus. Many of you will have visited shops and seen they had empty shelves. Many of you will have placed orders for certain food, only to be told that it was out of stock or in short supply. Thankfully for all of us, this didn't last long, and the suppliers caught up with the orders, and we were back in shops with full shelves again. And despite all of this, none of us went hungry. We had at worst just to settle for a slightly different meal. While shopping in those less than perfect conditions, I thought a lot about the people around the world who never have the opportunity to choose food like we do. So many people we know go hungry and rely on others to give them and their families something to eat. Many people rely simply on what they can grow, and of course that all depends on the sort of weather they have. Reading the passage from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 1 to 5, he is telling everyone to come, eat, drink, and don't worry if you have no money. Isaiah, of course, is talking about offering free nourishment to the soul. He tells them that it's simple to receive nourishment from God. All you have to do is come to God, listen to him, call on him, and receive from him. Which all sounds very simple, but in truth it is. I think what usually holds us back is time. We begin with all good intentions, but then we get interrupted and distracted from things around us. We all need to set aside some time to be with God. The covenant that God made with Noah, he has never broken. The covenant of peace he made with the people of Israel, and a promise of a permanent homeland he made with David, he renewed time and time again despite their disobedience, because he is a forgiving God. We are all his people, and Isaiah urges his people, and he encourages us to call on the Lord while he is near. The Lord is going nowhere, but we are often far from him. Isaiah brings a message of hope that looks forward to the coming of the Messiah. In fact, Isaiah speaks more about the coming Messiah than any of the other prophets in the Old Testament. We now move forward about 700 years in time to our second reading from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14, verses 13 to 21. And we hear all about the work of the Messiah. It's the account of Jesus feeding the 5,000, which is an amazing story. It took place just after John the Baptist was beheaded. And Jesus must have been very devastated at the news, so much so that he went off on his own in a boat onto the Sea of Galilee. Later in that day, the disciples told him that a great crowd had come to see him, and what should they do? Jesus told them, "Go and feed them." But how could they feed all these people with only 5 loaves and 2 fish? This was originally very insufficient, but in his hands it became enough. I think we often consider what we give to God as very small, but in his hands he can use and multiply whatever we give him, be it talent, treasure or time. It is when we give to Jesus that our resources are multiplied. The passage states that there were 5,000 men, so if we add the women and the children, the disciples probably fed around 15,000 people. An interesting point that I've often raised is, when did this miracle actually happen? Did it take place when Jesus held the food? Or did it happen when the disciples handed out the food? Jesus passed the food to the disciples, and they kept on giving it out until everyone was full, and as we know, there was lots of food left over. God is generous. He never runs out. He is always willing to give. He is just waiting for you to ask. Amen.